soon as we use the term mind, a natural question should arise, what is that? What do we mean by mind? And as soon as we use the word thought, what do we mean by thought? Now the curious thing is, mind may be a kind of vague kind of thing, but thought we're quite aware of. Not just thought, but we're also aware of feelings. We're aware of sentiments. We're aware of joys and sorrows. We're aware of ups and downs. We're aware of memories and how our feelings are associated with that. That's very different from a so-called physical world, which has to do with measurements. It has to do with qualities, dimensions, length, breadth, height, hardness. And even if you go into the physics of things, there are qualities there such as mass, spin, charge, all those kinds of things. And so is it a fact that there's a physical world and there's a mental world? Are they the same thing? Are they different? And what's the benefit of knowing this? So let us deal with how our Vedanta philosophy views it, and then see if it makes sense to us. Now you see what happened some time ago in the Western world is that thinking people got into trouble with an established authority, which happened to be the Christian Church, Catholic Church. And so some people were burnt at the stake for radical ideas. Other people just had to toe the line a little bit, Galileo and so on. But there was a feeling, therefore, that if we come up with some ideas about the physical realm, and the more and more our investigation reveals, and the more ideas we have about what is this world, it would be a dangerous thing to bring in anything to do with mind or spirit or what have you. And the idea of the psyche, something that is indicates spirit, mind, all of those things. We have to make sure that we don't tread on that ground in case we make a blunder. And so for that reason, by the 19th century, a dualism that had occurred started to be the normal way of thinking for thinking people, particularly with revolutions in the 18th century, where there was a radical shift in thinking only because it was a revolution against establishment, including an organized religion or church. And so we have a kind of deism. Things can run by themselves. We leave it like that. Let's assume that there is a God. He made the universe. Then he went off to heavenly Hawaii on holiday and left it to its own devices. Wound the clock up and left it like that. That was a kind of thinking. And then, as science develops more and more, and nature is being studied more and more and more, well, you have a clock. Maybe it's a self-replicating, self-organizing, self-running clock. Why do we need anything more? And so the 19th century merging into the 20th century meant that science was very predominantly, unofficially atheistic. It had no need for a God. But the kind of God they had no need for was some entity outside things. And that has led now to the idea that everything has to be physical. So there is a philosophy, I suppose, or approach to life which says, it's a physicalist approach, everything has to be physical. If you want to come up with an answer to any problem whatsoever, it must be purely in the physical realm, and that means the quantitative realm, the realm of measurement and data, and that's it. And no room for quality, no room for feelings, no room for sentiments, no room for the internal world that factually we all experience. But we can't measure it. You can't say, let me go and get a bucket full or 1 kilogram of love. What does that look like? How heavy is it? It's not quantifiable like that. And so there's a kind of realm which we are aware exists. And it is an individual realm in the sense that I can't encroach on your realm. What you think is in your so-called head, proverbial head, and what is in my head you cannot have access to, and what is in your head I cannot have access to, that kind of thing. But you see, where does this physicality come from? If we have a subtle world of thoughts and feelings, and we know we can direct the physical from it, that's an established thing. We know that if we think in a kind of lazy, slothful way, then maybe the liver becomes slow and we have a bit of digestion problems. We know that if we get mentally disturbed, if we get stressed, we know that the breathing is faster and the heart rate changes. And it has nothing to do with the heart doing it. It has nothing to do with the liver doing it. The fact that a mental condition had its effect on the physical plane. And that gives us a kind of sense of separateness in a way, even though we also don't feel separate. We feel what is called mind, what is called body is actually one and the same thing. And yet our language about it creates a separateness. And also our language betrays the fact that there is in a way separateness. Because if we are to say my this, my that, as subject and object, there has to be a sense of possessiveness that I really understand, and it comes out in linguistics. My body, my leg, my shoe. And one thing we know that if I cut my leg off somehow, it gets gangrene or something, then I can watch it being taken away in a bucket. But it doesn't intrinsically affect me as a person. I don't feel that 1/4 of me left. And of course, what we call a physical body is not the same as it was when you were 5, 3, 2, 1, when you were just born, when you were there in the womb, 9 months, a closed environment where you grew up as a teenager and so on. We know that all these changes are taking place without intrinsically affecting what we sense to be a unit entity called I. We are the same person. That's what we register. So it seems that amidst all these physical changes, there is some kind of mental understanding, more subtle than it. And if you take a kind of general law, rule, that something that is associated but more subtle is likely to be more causal. Now, is it possible, therefore, that all the physical world that we experience is simply a manifestation of our thought? Is it a product of the mind? And if we see that logically it has to be, then by examining all kinds of things, then this is a philosophy called idealism. And the great German philosopher Kant, Immanuel Kant, instituted this transcendental idealism, saying that there were two things seemingly. One was noumenon and one was phenomena. Phenomena is the physical world of our experience and is only present when we register the data, all the information, through the avenues, through the information gathering avenues that we have. We call these the senses. And Vivekananda is extremely careful to point out in his Raja Yoga that it's not really the eyes that see, ears that see, and so on and so forth. These are external things, avenues, if you will. But actually, all of these are internal. And according to our psychology, they are part and parcel of overall what we call Well, we can say mind, but actually the language is more an instrument internal to us. An instrument is something that can be used. It has a facility, it has a function, and likely it has parts and can be observed and used, of course, which means there must be some kind of user there. And so, just as the body can be compared to something like a car, is a useful instrument for what? For perceiving whatever is there, and whatever is there is unknown and unknowable. And this is the idealistic language, and Swami Vivekananda himself uses it. What is out there is unknown and unknowable. And the only reason why we're able to register it in its split-up form, in its form and name and identity and measurement, is all of that is because the mind is there to do it. The mind is there, and because the mind is there and concepts are there within it, what we see and experience is just only a representation. It's only just a kind of outer symbol, if you will, of what is actually there. We don't know what is there necessarily. So when we are given a question, does a tree that falls in a forest and nobody to hear it, is it really doing it? And of course, we can say, yes, why not? It's doing it, whether we're there, whether we're not there, whether we see it, whether we not see it. But when we bring it into our realm of experience, what we're doing is we are taking all the symbols, and people, modern people now, who have looked at this from this psychological point of view, will compare our world of our senses, and that's all we can say about it, the physical world, and say that it is something like a dashboard. Supposing you're on an airplane and you're flying at night and you only see what's presented on the dashboard so that you can fly because you know what's going on by virtue of all the symbols and all the indicators and lights and what have you on the dashboard. But is it really the outer environment that the plane is flying through? No. Can we direct the airplane because of it? Yes. It's a bit like, you see, operating some machinery in a factory, and you may require measurement of chemicals at various stages of the process, which used to be done manually, and everything done manually, measured manually. But with modern technology, you dispense with that manual thing. You make automatic samplers and adjusters to flow, and it all gets registered to a central operating room where there are panels there and tells you exactly what's going on and how much of it is going on and what flows need to be adjusted and so on. And the only person who's sitting there is somebody who is there to understand what's going on and make sure that it's all operating smoothly and can report the data. Probably even that person is not necessary as technology advances. So, is our world like that we are seeing some things which are just kind of a registration of what's going on in a remote way? In which case, the real entity is the mental processes. And the mental processes is really the interface between the subtle forces and the physical. Now we understand this more when we go through, and I've mentioned this so much of what I'm saying is just revision really, but no harm. And so there are these various principles identified, generalized and identified. 24 of them if you consider just nature. If you want to go beyond that, it's about 26. Never mind, let's deal with the 24. What is our experience? Our experience is through the avenues of senses which happen to be on the outside of the skin. All our information is coming from a skin. A small cell, even a bacterial cell that is working and operating, never mind about our community cells that call the body, is getting its information from the interface of the membrane and its environment. And that information is being carried into the central part, and then and the information is going out again. There's a constant exchange of information going in and out. Same thing. On our own membrane, called the skin, we have all the information coming in. And where is it coming to? Well, there's no point if it's coming in and it's not being registered. So there must be a faculty that is registering it. There must be some organized structural things called objects. And there must be information gathering senses which catch it. And we must have an efferent current that reacts to it. So now we have 15 items, 5 objects, 5 organs incoming. We call Jnanendriyas, organs of information, Karmendriyas, organs of action. And then we have a 16th one, which is collectively called the mind. But the mind is just a generalized term for a number of different components. And also material, no doubt, but not physical. So what are these components? Well, there's a coordinating sense that we call ego, sense of I, that knows I'm still existing and unchanged, even though my leg went off, or my arm went off, or a part went off, or it changed. Even despite that, there's some coordinating thing that says, this is me. And then also within that are the subtle senses, because the attention which is there to the ear, to the eye, to the external organs, that is all replayed in the head. Now, I'm using head in a very metaphorical sense because, there is a correlation with these ideas and thoughts and the brain, there's no doubt. The brain itself is an instrument. You might say it's an instrument of something much more subtle, because our experiences cannot be found in the neurology of the brain. We find different areas lit up here and there, so to speak, if we study the neurology of it. But yet, you see, this is a bit like saying, well, there's an electrical current, and it's producing light and various other things, depending on what instrumentation we apply to it. But one thing we cannot say, that electricity is supplied by a light bulb. If we didn't know any better, that's what we would say. And yet it's not so. There is something that is substantially before that, as a ground to it, as a causal ground to it. And so when we look at these causal relationships more and more, because obviously the brain is just organic matter, and if you're a physicalist, you say it's just molecules and atoms, and no different from anything else. And so if we rearrange our understanding and say that what we call the physical world has to be there as it is, in a general way, because we have standard instruments, but our experience of it is unique. And the experience of it is like an individual wave, because we have these components which then relate to some kind of unity of experience. And then where does that come from? And why should that mind be there? Because it's a fragmenter. Fragmenting what? It's making a fragmented world, which is different if you have different sense organs. interpretation is different. And so we cannot say it's an entirely fixed thing. It's entirely dependent on our interpretation of it. To this extent, we cannot say it's real. And that is why, when we talk about all of this, we're examining from a point of view of those who are sitting there thousands of years ago trying to figure things out. And what they are looking for is the highest possible generalization, a reductionism, if you will, from so-called complexity to an ultimate simplicity, which is a generalized version of reality to say, once I discover that, I've discovered everything at its base. And all the rest become manifested expressions. That's the point. So the mind itself, therefore, must be a manifested expression of something else. And because it is a fragmenta and uses time and space and the law of causality and introduces colors and this and that and the other and so on, and inside that is all feelings, all emotions, memories, everything that we could divide into conscious mind, subconscious mind, and so on, all of that is there. But there is also a determinative faculty that wills, let me direct my attention here, let me direct it there. That's the thing that we can use. There must be a user for it, therefore. And we cannot find it in the mind simply because we can observe the goings-on, and also we can observe the sections, divisional sections that are taking place, and we can change our thinking. We have the capacity to do that. We have the capacity to look at all the goings-on in this mental field, let's call it, and we have the capacity to change it. Where is this capacity coming from? So it's coming from an independent entity that makes a decision, for good or bad. If it makes a good decision, good means we're avoiding pain. If we're doing that, then we'll take the attention and all our energy and all our thought and all our feelings in a certain direction. Willingly, we'll do it. And that means that the whole of the 15 or so, 16 components, all change in conformity to that will. And where is it all coming from? If the mind is an interface, what is it interfacing with? Mental states. And mental states are fields. And now we're in the world of quantum. Quantum initiated, if you will, as a concept initially, and then tested out rigorously. And that is from 1905 already, starting from there, and elaborated in the 1920s and even more in the 1940s. Then, do we understand everything about it? Absolutely not, because we cannot see anything. So, you've all heard of the great discovery, no doubt, big headlines, Higgs boson, and nobody ever saw it. Why did they not see it? Because they expected to see something peculiar, see some effect within a certain range. If you're given a variable, you can look for it. And so, looking for it in that particular range, they managed to find an effect which came out as its own effects, because that Higgs boson is so quick, as it were, rapidly appearing so much, before you know it, it's decayed. Decayed into what? Well, decayed into muons or quarks or whatever it is, some subatomic particles. And the word is misleading, because if you say decay, it means it's a magic thing. We don't know how it happened or why it happened. But if you view it as a wave system, you see a wave comes, and that wave then disappears and gives rise, let's say, to 2, 3 other waves. In that way, we can understand it didn't decay, it just simply went back into its substance erupting in a different way. That's all. Nothing magical about it. But then we have to shift our understanding to say it's like an ocean with waves. Now we have a much better concept. And the mystery is gone. And the mystery of how you can get these subtle waves to look like the world we have is also solved. Because what we're seeing is a kind of dashboard, a representation of what is there, conveniently fed in, made conceptual. And so we only know when it's there when we use our instruments, namely the senses. This is called measurement. When we measure something, then the something has to be there. And then before you measured it, what was it? It was kind of like an amorphous wave held in an indeterminate state. And by will, you channeled it into something that you could understand and measure. No mystery about it. Not at all. And yet, it remains as a question mark because people take the physical world as the reality. So, Vedanta uses this language of mithya, vivarta, appearance, seeming, apparitional, all of that, knowing that we don't see it in this way. We may feel it, but we don't see it. So therefore, we are examining this world of Maya, containing vidya, avidya, we covered that in the previous talk. And we are looking at it as a reality that gives us a problem because it doesn't solve the issue. And when we examine what is consciousness, it doesn't solve that issue either because we're trying to get conscious. We have no choice as a physicalist to get it has to come out of the physical matter, namely the brain, the neurology of the brain. It has to come out from there because of this divorce from religion, organized religion, and so on and so forth, to everything must be physical. There's nothing else. Not knowing that you're examining the very, very surface representation of something that is more subtle and deeper, the mind. So, what do we produce in the physical world? Whatever we think. And so we labor the point. First of all, because I'm not the mind or the mental field, I can observe it. I can observe the waves coming and going. Very often in the guided meditation that we give, I ask you, have a look at the mental field, an internal field of activity that you can see, oh, this is going on, that's going on, and so on and so forth. And sometimes all of these thoughts can glide across each other, and we're simply watching a kind of internal set of impressions and complaining because this traffic noise won't settle. So we're saying, well, be patient, just watch it. Sooner or later, it doesn't like being watched, so-called, and starts settling. And then it occurs. I'm the witness of all this activity that is going on. Then that leads you then to a deeper causal position. Who am I? What am I? Am I these thoughts? If I'm these thoughts and that's my nature, then there's no hope for me. If I have a bad character, I can't reform it. That's my nature. But actually we can. We can adjust our behavior, absorb learnings, and design a new course of action and go along it with resolve, determination, repetition, with a conviction, fundamental conviction, that if this world is like that, a series of changing impressions brought about by changing waves in a mental field, brought about by states states of quantum fields, if you want to put it in scientific language, where some unknown, unmeasured frequency and coordination takes place. And then through the sense organs, that is through the mind, appears at this world. If we re-examine that, re-examine it again, through the literature of the Upanishads, Bhagavad Gita, etc., through those people, the lens is that of non-dualism. Now, non-dualism is very, very important because it solves all our problems when we say there's only one thing. We say there's more than one thing, we have a problem. So these thinking sages, having experienced this oneness and understanding a little bit of rationale why it should be there, produce literature which is uncompromisingly non-dualistic. Because all of that manifestation comes from one mind, cosmic mind. It has to be like that. The highest generalization has to be something that is omnipresent, omniscient, omnipotent, in short, God. But it's not an external God. It's an entity that was there and as a mind distributed its thoughts and made a world of quantum fields. And what we call atoms are defined by physicists themselves as excitations in quantum fields. It doesn't mean much to us, but we can imagine something like, a wave system somewhere, and something, agitates somewhere, and then there's an appearance of some atomic structure, and the atomic structures only stay fixed when we try to measure them and try to find out their quantitative nature through the instrumentation that we have. And even those things that we don't know of because we haven't got access to them, visual access, say, let us say we take a telescope and examine the furthest corners of the universe. Well, the only way we can see that is through the infrared. Things have to be channeled, an extension of our senses has to be brought in so that we can make some sense of it. So even that, you see, is a measured version of what is there and gives us a kind of answer, but really it's only a representational thing because if it's coming from a cosmic mind, everything then is cosmic mind in one form or another, in one way or another, with some frequency or another, with some quality of a property, I should say, of, let's say, mass and charge and spin and so on. All of these things. Mystery gone then. So only because we took that fundamental being, which our religious traditions may call God, may call the Lord, may call Bhagwan, may call the divine, may anthropomorphose for convenience, for the sake of devotees, as mother, father, friend, companion. All of that is coming from this cosmic mind. And where is that coming from? Cosmic mind. Well, if you're an idealist, that's enough. And for practical purposes, it may also be enough. But just for your information, that is coming from a potentiality. And the potentiality has three evolutionary forces sitting in equilibrium, and they then express. And their first expression is of absolute illumination and purity called cosmic mind. Now we can use the language cosmic Christ, cosmic Buddha, cosmic Ramakrishna, etc. We can use all that language, no doubt, and it gives us a wonderful concept. Is it just a concept? Well, it's as valid as any other thing in the world. Vivekananda's language for it is the highest reading to the human mind of the absolute, And so we've gone a little stage further and seen, oh, there's an absolute there. Yes. Is there any point in discussing it? Except to say it is there. No, no point whatsoever, because it's not spatial, it's not temporal, it's not moving. Something that is moving has a mover. You can't just say that it is, just a random thing, or that there's no mover, it's just physicality. You cannot say that. So all of this is coming from consciousness. And when we talk about consciousness now in its pristine form, it is consciousness itself, not as manifested as awareness, not as manifested as a kind of understanding and a review of feelings and impressions and thoughts and what have you. So that when we think then with will and direction, or even carelessly, we are really accessing the only thing which is there, that is cosmic mind. And cosmic mind is then creating its effect, as it were, through all the wave systems, all the fields, which modern physics is calling quantum fields, making excitations and coming out in a condensed form as the world that we understand through the senses. That comes out as the personalized relationships, comes out as personalized good fortune, bad fortune. All of that is just crystallized. So I'm fond of using the example that the sun evaporates water from the oceans, leaves the salt behind, and that is taken up because the atoms are distributed, and so they get lighter and they go up and they form amorphous clouds, and that all condenses ultimately as rainfall and enters into the earth. And the cycle repeats because all of that water finds its way to the oceans again, and so it goes on. This is the same principle, therefore. So, asserting a thought with great care, with a high level of selflessness, we are convinced then that its effect comes selflessly for everyone. A generosity of spirit embraces and affects everyone. That's why prayers are there. May all beings be happy. May all beings be peaceful. May all, the whole of nature benefit. See, that kind of approach. If we want peace in the world, we can say, may everybody get it. Not may this corner get it, but those I don't like, let them not be peaceful. Let everybody be prosperous. Yeah, but those people maybe not so much. You can't say that. If everybody now has this understanding of unity, won't the world be a different place? It will. And that's the practical advantage of this. The generosity of spirit. And do we have any examples of that? Yes, the highest examples, the highest points of evolution in human evolution come as huge giant waves, like a Jesus or a Buddha, something like that, that affect the whole universe for thousands and thousands of years. Such a giant wave comes. One person having done it, we can all do it. We can all be giant waves. These were giant waves from the start. But we, a small wave, can build up and become also giant waves, all by way of being very careful, very directive about how we think, directing our thought in a specific way. So that is what we need to do. We need to do it cautiously, carefully, positively, joyfully, taking all these other waves as a sport, as a game. Now, this Avadutta Gita, what has all this got to do with Avadutta Gita other than, okay, it's a strict treatise on non-dualism. And so, of course, Avadutta is a title, actually. So, this person, this auditor, says this: it is God's grace alone which gives wise men the desire to realize non-dual Brahman. But Swami, I thought you said this was a treatise on non-dualism, and yet dualism is coming out here. There seems to be a God whose grace is there, and there seems to be a Brahman. Can you explain that? Yes. What we call this God's and God's grace is this cosmic mind from which everything comes. And just to complete the 24, we have 16 items in our concrete world, our symbolic world, and the mind being the interface between that and what we call tanmatras, mere elements, thought to be 5. And from those 5, each one is more subtle than the preceding one, or at least the succeeding one. And so the preceding one is more subtle, more vast, more ungraspable, and so on. And this is our spiritual ascent. Suppose you want to use yogic language about it, these are chakras, ascending, as it were, through more and more subtle elements of nature, starting off with what is uselessly called earth, uselessly called because it's not exactly earth, but there's a dominance of it when it goes over the border. Once it goes over the mind fragmenta, it comes out like that. So it has a predominance of that subtle element. And of course, water is there. And as the causal of that, again, not exactly water, but coming out when it goes over the border, as it were, into real water. And then radiance or fire is there. And then, of course, air is there. And finally, a kind of space or ether is there also, which has only a subtle vibration, so hardly noticeable. And then that all comes from cosmic mind. You add all that up, and then plus senses of individualities, ego. So there's another 6 to the 16. And then by the time you come to the cosmic mind, that's number 23. And then that's coming really from the potentiality akin to dreamless sleep in our own microcosmic experience on a cosmic basis. It's there. So after eons of time, the whole thing folds up, as it were, and retreats, as it were, and is withdrawn, as it were, into that potentiality, which is also God. And then what's behind it all? That is Brahman, that the absolute. When you sit there, all the other stuff is gone. So it is only this grace that comes from this cosmic mind that gives wise people, most people aren't wise, but those people who are discerning and say, yes, I'm open to this. What will happen? Gives them the desire to realize what? The ultimate perfection, the absolute, what we call Brahman. Thus they are set free from what? From great fear. What's our goal? Apaya, fearlessness. That's why in iconography we'll see that every deity has their hand up, giving assurance, don't fear, fearlessness. So desire, what is the desire? Commentator says, it is true that mere desire to realize Brahman cannot save men from great fear, but the author has taken it for granted that the aspirant is qualified and competent, and therefore Brahman will be surely realized. So it requires a preparation of the ground. Just like when you sow a seed, then it's useless unless the ground has been tilled, preserved, maybe loosened up with water, maybe nutrients put there, and so on. And then this non-dual Brahman, or we go on to great fear. What is that? The whole world is fraught with fear. And it mentions, and you can make an individual list of it, So what is that fear? Well, death is the primary fear, disease, despair, grief, and so on. Nobody really wants to have any of these things. So there's an inherent fear. What if I die tomorrow? And what will happen when I die? And then what about this disease? I hope I maintain my good health. And then I should not feel in despair. I should not feel despondent. I should know that there is always hope. And then grief. I don't wish to be depressed or unhappy. I don't want to suffer. Nobody wants all these things. These are get relieved through this revelation. So where there are two, there is fear. That's the utility, as it were, of non-dualistic position. If there are no two, there's no second to be fearful of, no second to be jealous of, no second to be a rival of. And then what we mean by non-dual Brahman, Brahman is one without a second. That says, the Chandogya Upanishad says it. In the non-dualistic experience, the knower, the knowledge, and the knowable, they all become one. And thus, if you know Brahman, of course you become Brahman. So the whole thing, the Avadhuta Gita, starts off with that, in that vein, and goes off. Indeed, everything in this universe is filled with Atman. Atman, how did you shift from Brahman to Atman? Because Atman is the self, not only seemingly localized here, but also the self of everything. And since the Atman is covered by itself, nothing else covering it, then how can I worship that formless, indivisible, immutable, supreme beatitude? That's a question. The commentator will say, well, worship is possible when there are two, the worshipper and the object of worship. And so when the unitive knowledge of I am Brahman, I am that only existence, then who will worship whom is the question. The universe consisting of the five elements, which I've covered here now, we're calling tanmatras. Tanmatras, and we might update the concept to say quantum fields. Space, air, fire, water, earth is like water in a mirage. Ah, being that one stainless Atman, to whom shall I bow down? Oh. The world consisting of these various elements comes out, and we take the mirage to be concrete. Being in a desert, being thirsty, we see this mirage in the distance, and we walk toward it. Ultimately, what will happen is the mirage will disappear. But if we don't take any measures, if we simply accept it at face value, then we're caught in a cycle of misunderstanding, and that gives us fear of all these things. Truly, the Atma alone, says the text, is all, and in it there is neither division nor non-division. It appears to be, to me, perplexing to say, the Atman exists, or the Atman does not exist. He's saying it from a realized position. Neither division nor non-division. The Atman is inexpressible. Everything in this world has been either conceptualized by the mind or expressed by speech, except this one thing, the Atman. There's not an object of it. No conception of division or non-division is possible with regard to this, since no second object apart from it exists. For example, if a person had lived in the solar region from the beginning of his life, he would have no conception of darkness, of light. Then he goes on. The quintessence, very core of the whole Vedanta, is the knowledge of the realization of the Atman. By nature, I am that formless, all-pervading Atman. That's my nature. That's a radical departure from I am so-and-so with a history, a story behind it, and a feeling, well, nobody likes me, I'm the victim. What a pity, what a pity. Instead of what a glory, we can shift our thinking, and then even the phenomenal world gets adjusted. Undoubtedly, I am that Atman, which is omnipresent, luminous, undivided like space, intrinsically pure and unclouded by Maya. And of course, the commentator here points out, if you say luminous, while the actual Sanskrit word is deva, it also means God, a deity. But the Atman is self-luminous, as is a pearl with its luster. Truly, he says from his vantage point, I am the imperishable, infinite, and the embodiment of pure consciousness. I do not know how happiness and misery are experienced or who it is that experiences them. For me, there's no mental action, he goes on to say, good or bad. For me, there is no physical action, good or bad. For me, there is no verbal action, good or bad. I am undying consciousness, pure and transcendent. The Atman is actionless. Its presence stimulates the illusion of action everywhere. I am one and in everything. I am unbounded and beyond space. How can I see my own self appearing or disappearing? Why do you not understand you are truly that absolute one, he goes on. You are that eternal Atman, reflecting all equally. You are the unrefuted Lord and ever shining. Then how can you think of day or light or night or darkness? That is why this Advaita is the ultimate tool, because it solves all the answers to the questions by saying, well, actually, all of your problem area is all this changing phenomena. Actually, the only thing that is there is this Atman, projecting itself something like a film or a dream. So this is our ultimate tool. Dualism is also a tool. Love of God is a tool. All these things are tools. They purify the mind. But the ultimate tool that removes all problems, and also not just problems of trying to figure out what is going on, what is this, what is that, is there a philosophy, and so on and so forth, what is physicalism, and so on all of this, but on a practical level, removing all fear. Being completely fearless, knowing that there is only one. When I raise my hand and hit my other hand, I wouldn't normally do it. But thinking that I am separate from everything else, I do it to somebody else in my own view, and not realizing I'm doing it to myself. There's only one. There's a unity of existence. You were never born. You'll never die. Reiterated. And the practical application of that is, it is told to Arjun on the battlefield by Krishna. I don't know why you're sitting in misery. I don't know why you want to withdraw. I don't know why you want to run away. I don't know why you don't want to do your duty, because if you think that is a noble thing, because by avoiding your duty in an environment where you are required to establish morality, then you think that you're going to be slain, or you think that you're also going to slay. No. Body can be slain, no doubt, but you yourself, not so. And the second chapter, really, of the Bhagavad Gita is something that should be read on a daily basis for those who are suffering bereavement or potential bereavement. So, you're always present within as well as without. In fact, within and without is just a dotted line difference. There's no real solid barrier there. You are that supreme beatitude always and everywhere. Why then do you run here and there like a confused ghost? For you and me, there can be neither union nor separation. In reality, neither you nor I nor this world exists. The Atman alone abides. So this first chapter of this, the eight chapters are there, 8 sections are there, we'll be discussing this Atman. And in other chapters, we'll be discussing other aspects of this. So, for example, in myself, there are no such alternatives as delusion or lack of delusion, grief or lack of grief, greed or lack of grief. I am existence, knowledge, bliss, and boundless as space. Supposing we assert that with true understanding, how will our life change and reform? So, what should we do? Look at the mental field and see what is operating, divided into pain-bearing or not. And we select the non-pain-bearing portion and course of action, something like shifting a gear from the bottom to the middle to the very top, and learn to do that with great ease and naturalness. Habitually we do that until actually everything becomes pure, pure meaning no selfishness involved, with a sense of unity, always doing that. And that means that we have to understand the principles that we've been discussing first. Having done that, we then have to close a gap. The gap is, I am so-and-so with a story and a history, and here is the absolute. The absolute has no history, no time, no space. And that is my fundamental source, my presence. And it is not a blank, it is not a nothing. It is everything, it is fullness, it is existence itself and consciousness itself and bliss. And from that comes everything. All the dream comes from there. And we can see how this is symbolized. How in iconography, Vishnu is there lying on the ocean, producing a dream. And the dream becomes our world. And then withdrawing that dream into the sleeping Vishnu and projecting it out again over eons and eons and eons of humanly calculated time. Now we go through that drama ourselves individually, and this is one aspect of the Vedanta philosophy that highlights that as a final conclusion, as a final argument, which tells us that this is all kind of dreamlike state, that consciousness itself can experience waking events, can experience dreams, can experience memories, can experience dreamless sleep also, and even that produces an awareness of peace, and that I am the witness of all of this. The Upanishads tell us from different directions all of these things, and such literature as the Avadhuta Gita by the Dattatreya as the author. And so by really firmly establishing ourselves in these principles, and then sincerely following only one thing, that is purifying the mind, clarifying the mind, filling the mind with pure qualities, noble characteristics. Not just morality. Morality is just maintenance. That's all. Anybody can do it. Atheists can do it. Anybody can do it. That's just decency, human decency. It has to be pushed to its ultimate. We have to be ultimately extremists in our orientation towards spiritual life. We have to take all our mundane world and make sure that it is small in comparison to the spiritual, the unity, which is big. That position has to be done. And that is called spiritual practice. And we use scripture, teachers, mantras, regularity in our practice. We use the moods of the day and night. Anything that we can, we should use. Such a subtle thing, such a subtle point, means we have to use 1,000 tools if necessary, all applied with patience, love, and dedication. Well, I think we exceeded our time even, but anyway, that's okay. All right, we'll leave it at that. So returning just briefly in summary to our theme, mind what you think. Understand what is mind, understand what is thought, and then be prepared to shift and change it since you are in control. And if you assert it, you'll know it. All right. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be with all.
Thank you, Swamiji.
Good.
Thank you, Swamiji. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Swamiji.
Swamiji.
Thank you very much.